the debate on like what is home, I've asked a lot of people that question and I get a different answer every single time. When you ever hear somebody that says like, well, housing is, if we had more housing, then we would fix the homeless problem. That's not necessarily true. That's one of three monumental things that are needed. You can't just move a bunch of addicts or people on the streets into homes and then expect we just solve this issue. It takes the meeting of immediate need to allow people to start thinking a little bit further.
Your mom is like one of the hardest working people you know,
Yep.
right? And it's not, and I think there's just way too much stigma around homelessness and addiction.
Yeah.
It's like this affects a lot of people and people we love.
Yeah, when you're dealing with complex issues like homelessness, the way in which you approach an issue locally matters and, in my opinion, is the most effective approach to solving any issue. It's not going to be done on a top-down strategy. We are meant to live in localized community and have human connection.
This episode is sponsored by our partners at BetterHelp. We talk a lot on this show about what gets in the way of us showing up as our best selves. A lot of it comes down to us needing to do the inner work. Therapy is one of the best places to do that. BetterHelp connects you with a qualified therapist online and makes it easy to switch if the match isn't right. When life feels overwhelming, therapy can help. Sign up and receive 10% off at betterhelp.com/loveready. That's betterhelp.com/loveready.
Today, I am excited to be joined by Bob Dalton. Bob is a social entrepreneur, a social architect, and he has dedicated his life to helping people build community. He has spent the last decade traveling around North America to homeless shelters. His company is called Sackcloth and Ashes, where every blanket that they sell, they donate a blanket in kind to a local homeless shelter. He's donated more than 500,000 blankets to shelters across North America. He's also the founder of LOCL, a tech platform helping people discover and engage with local communities and events. We are going to explore how our physical spaces and our homes and our connections with each other inform how we love well. Bob Dalton. I'm Robin Ducharme, and I'm so happy to meet you today. And I'm very grateful that you drove from San Diego to Los Angeles to be with me today. So
Yeah.
I just want to say like a heartfelt thank you, because that's, I really appreciate that.
Of course, yeah, no, excited to have the combo and meet you as well.
You know, we have similar goals in our lives, and you share your mission, and you call yourself a social entrepreneur or social architect, I've heard it said. Mm-hmm. So can you tell me about yourself and more about your mission on community and...
Well, the social architect thing is funny because when I was young, I lived with my uncle and my grandma. My mom and I did. And my grandma bought me these Lincoln logs. And every time my uncle would come home, I'd built like these crazy structures with all these Lincoln logs. And he always said like, he'd always call my grandma into the room. You know, he's like, oh my God, look at what Bobby built. Like he's going to be an architect, you know? And so I believed that I was going to be an architect from a really young age. And, you know, when somebody speaks something over you when you're young, you know, you like really take that to heart. And I believed that I was going to be an architect up until like sophomore year in high school when I studied Algebra 2. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be an architect.
There's a lot of math involved.
Exactly. There's too much math for me. I'm out. Like I'll figure something else out.
Yeah.
And then like a couple years ago, one of my mentors was like, you know what you are? You're a social architect. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Because my whole childhood, I always thought I was going to be an architect. And he was like, yeah, like you think with the mind of an architect of trying to construct and come up with strategies to make society a better place.
Wow.
And
a more beautiful place.
Yeah. And so like as it was kind of this beautiful like full circle moment where I was like, well, I actually am an architect and a designer, but I'm doing it in a different way than what I had originally thought, you know?
Absolutely. I just think that's like you said, it was like you had your uncle naming something over you that you didn't see in yourself. It's like somebody shining a light on something, on your gift.
Yeah.
Really
exactly.
beautiful. So you share your story very openly about like growing up. You grew up in Oregon?
Yeah, I grew up in Oregon. My mom and I moved to Coos Bay, Oregon, little coastal fisherman town.
Oh, wow.
From California. I was born in California, and we moved up there right when I was like starting grade school. And my mom wanted me to not grow up with around a bunch of gangs, which is where she grew up in like just outside of the Bay Area.
Okay.
And so she was familiar with Oregon because she went to community college there, moved us up there to Coos Bay, and that's where I grew up. And it was like this little town of 30,000 people right on the Oregon coast, which I've been up and down the entire West Coast, and I'm convinced, and I'm super biased, but I think that the Oregon coast, specifically that area, is one of the most beautiful places on the entire West Coast.
Yeah.
It's very rugged, very like gloomy, but the waves are like crashing up against the mountain, and the trees in the forest are very like Hobbit vibes, you know?
Oh yeah, it's nature.
Yeah, and so the older when you're growing up there, you're like always complaining, like I want to make it out of here, you know. But then the older that I get, and the more that I go back to visit, I'm like, man, I love this place. Like it's so beautiful, and I always make it a priority to make it out to the cliffs and see the ocean, and go into the woods and get to experience it, you know, in a completely different light. So it's a beautiful land, and I'm really grateful for the community that I grew up with there, and it's the community that raised me, you know?
Yes. And so, like, you use the word community, Bob. Being, like, growing up in a small town, and it was just you and, was it just you and your mom? Like,
Yeah, it was just me and my mom, and then my sister came 8 years later, but yeah, it was.
And so was there community when you were growing up? Like, was your mom connected to the people around you? Like, was there friends?
Yeah. My mom mostly worked her ass off to pay the bills. So she was a waitress and helped with managing restaurants and waitressing at restaurants. So she didn't have like a really strong social circle. I started going to a church by myself, riding the church bus when I was in first grade.
Wow.
And I started going because this like bus would come through our apartment complex, and all the kids would get off and they'd have candy. And I'm like, what the heck? I want some candy.
Yeah.
So I started going to church. I was like, to get some candy and like hang out with all my little friends. And started going to this church. And that was like my first sense of community. It was this old Baptist church that was very fundamental Christian. And they would always give me a hard time because I'd like wear a hat or I'd wear shorts, you know? And they're like, where's the rest of your pants? You know, it was very like fundamental, but it was a really strong sense of like my first glimpse into community. They would do a potluck every Sunday. And that was my first sense of community. Yeah. From like first grade to 10th grade.
First till 10th, wow.
I went to that church, yeah.
Yeah.
And and then apart from there was other religious communities that I got to learn about, an organization called Young Life, and then another church that I ended up going to after this one. But as a kid, that was kind of like weirdly raising myself and being a street kid, essentially. It was the church communities that like I got to learn about how to interact in community and learn a value system that was like bigger than myself, you know?
Yeah. I was raised Catholic and went to church every Sunday with my family, went to Catholic schools. I don't remember there being like this deep sense of community in the church itself because I wasn't going to all the church groups, and we would just go every Sunday, right? It's like, put on your good clothes, we're going to church. And then you come home and you're like, rip your clothes, you know, back into life, right?
Yep.
But I did have a lot of community in my family. Like my family, my parents are close to all their siblings, and just, there was always people around. It was like an open door policy when I was growing up. So I just had a sense of how important community is and how it was for us. So in 2013, your mom became homeless.
Yeah. So I was like 23 at the time and going through a really weird time in my life, as most young people in their 20s, like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Her ending up homeless was unexpected. It was, she went through a series of events where she lost her mother, my grandma, and her older brother. And that sent her down like a a pretty dark spiral of, they were her support system. They were the people that she would call in hard times and things.
They were her rocks, her anchors.
They were her rock. And when she lost that, she lost a piece of herself, and in that process, fell into some addiction. And in the process of trying to start her life over, she ended up sleeping on beaches and benches. And she tried to move across the states to Florida from Oregon and thought her aunt would take her in. Aunt didn't take her in, so she ended up in that scenario. I'm scrambling, trying to figure out where she's at, what's happening to her, and taking a lot of this like anger and frustration into wanting to do something about this particular issue. So I started calling homeless shelters and just being like, hey, what do you guys need? And they're like, we need blankets. Never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, but I was like, if shelters need blankets, I'm going to start a blanket company. Yeah. And that's when I came up with the idea that for every blanket that I sell, I'll donate a blanket to a local homeless shelter,
Wow. So was your mom living in shelters at the time?
No, she was literally sleeping on benches in Florida, and then ended up hitchhiking to Ohio and found work.
Wow.
And for 4 years after that, was in and out of rehabs and went on a crazy
recovery journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then she, I was doing, as this blanket company grew, I started to do blanket drops at homeless shelters. And one of the homeless shelters that I went to was in Portland, Oregon, and it was a women's program. And I was there passing out blankets and doing our normal thing where I'd share like an encouraging word to the people in the program and saying, this is why I started this company, and it's my mom. And they said, the people working at the program were like, well, where's your mom at now? And I'm like, oh, I just had moved her back to Oregon, and she was like at her lowest of lows. Like at that point, it was no longer in and out of rehabs, it was in and out of hospitals. Yeah. And I had already accepted this is how she's gonna go. And I had already grieved her death. And I was honest with them. I'm like, yeah, I just moved her back to Oregon. She's, blacked out alcoholic. She's probably got days to live. That's where she's at. And they were like, well, we have 38 out of 40 slots filled here at this program. Do you think you could get her here for an interview?
Wow.
Like get her in the program. And if you've ever dealt with anybody with addiction or problems or anything, you're like, I'll try.
Yeah.
So I drove to where she was at, opened my car door and was like, I think you have one more chance at survival. If you get in my car, I'll take you to a program that would be glad to take you in and help you out. And if you don't, I need you to know, like, I'll ride this out with you. I'll walk with you to the end.
Oh my gosh.
And she got in my car and took her to the program, and she got in, and 12 months later, graduated the program sober, stayed another 12 months. And then after 24 months, they hired her on staff. And now she's working full-time at a nonprofit, is extremely healthy, and 6 years sober. And so
it's beautiful.
Yeah, the whole tie-in of she inspired this thing, this blanket company.
Yeah.
That ended up being the thing that led to her recovery. Is a beautiful full circle moment, and something that I will be grateful for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
It was never about business for me. It was about, taking action on something that I felt very emotional about at the time. And then it led to my mom's recovery, which, if you've ever dealt with addiction or have somebody that is in your life that's dealt with addiction, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a true miracle for
it is
anybody
a true
that survives
miracle.
it. Yeah.
It is an absolute miracle. I myself, I no longer drink. I stopped drinking alcohol last January. So over a year now. Yay!
Congrats. That's huge.
And at the time before I stopped, I was definitely in addiction. I was drinking for any and every. It wasn't a reason at that point. When you are using drugs or alcohol, I was using it to drown all the sorrows. Then it was just like also having a good time. I mean, it's just I'm always doing it, right?
Yeah.
And not for the best reasons. And when I did finally decide to stop, I did join AA. And I went through the 12 steps. And I mean, you talk about being a man of faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe and I live like through God, I'm here because of God. And I know that the miracle that I'm like, I don't even want it. I don't crave it. It's like totally out of my life,
Yeah.
But I know what it's like to live in a place where,
Yeah.
so like, that's a miracle.
Yeah, that is a beautiful thing. And it's beautiful that you were able to do that at a younger, early years, because when I quit drinking in September of 23, and I did it kind of as an experiment where I was like, I want to see how I feel after a month.
Yeah.
And I felt great. And I had been drinking a lot when I was on the road. Like I would travel every week and do speaking events or blanket drops or whatever. And I would naturally be out socializing and drinking all the time.
Yeah.
And never thought it was a problem. And then I stopped drinking and I felt great. And I was like, oh, I'll do 3 months. And then I did that. And then once I hit a year, I was like, I'm never drinking again.
Yeah.
And when I went through AA and was talking with my counselor, I'm like, I want to respect the people in AA because I don't know if I battled alcohol on the level of like a demon that a lot of people like that it is for some of these people. And so it's like, I'm like, is it disrespectful? I'm like, hey, my name's Bob. I'm an alcoholic. And my therapist was like, there's like different levels and tiers to this. Like, just because you didn't have to drink for 30 years and wreck your life doesn't mean that you struggled and had some aspect of codependency on drinking, especially that both of your parents are alcoholics. So it was an interesting part of my journey of like letting go of something that both of my parents deeply struggled with.
Yeah.
And something that I never thought I would give up, but grateful.
Well, and look at your journey, Bob. I mean, you think, and your mom's journey. So, she ended up, and this is what I was seeing when I was in the meetings, meeting all these amazing people who have really struggled. And they're saying like their situation was, some of them were in the situation like your mom was in.
Exactly.
Like they became homeless, they became unhoused.
Exactly.
Right? And like, I mean, it can happen. And of course, and this is what you're saying, it's like, your mom is like one of the hardest working people right? And it's not, and I think there's just way too much stigma around homelessness and addiction.
Yeah.
It's like this affects a lot of people and people we love.
Yeah.
If you're living on the streets, if you're without a house, obviously you're not feeling, I would assume, maybe I'm wrong, but you're not feeling safe. You don't have that safety of like, where's your next meal going to come from? Where am I going to sleep tonight? So that doesn't exist, right? Of like, and that's a need, a human need.
Yeah. So one of my biggest discoveries with homelessness as an issue is that your level of poverty is determined by how far out you can see. Meaning like you and I might be thinking a year, 3 years down the road, right? We're making plans. Somebody on the street is thinking, where am I going to get my next meal?
Yes.
Their level of poverty is determined by how far out that they can see. So when you provide a meal to someone and they don't have to worry about where am I going to eat next, you're allowing them the capacity to look a little further down the road. When you provide a shelter for someone, you're allowing them to look a little further down the road. So when you're tackling the issue of homelessness, there's really like 3 types of services. There's the meeting of immediate need. Mm-hmm. There's transitional programs like what my mom went through. And then there's housing. So when you ever hear somebody that says like, well, housing is, if we had more housing, then we would fix the homeless problem. That's not necessarily true. That's one of 3 monumental things that are needed. You can't just move a bunch of addicts or people on the streets into homes and then expect we just solve this issue. It takes the meeting of immediate need to allow people to start thinking a little bit further. It takes transitional programs to help people go through a process of getting recovery and experiencing sobriety and rebuilding some relationships and then getting housing, And so everyone in their journeys are on different places in their journeys. And some people are sleeping in cars, where some people are sleeping on streets, where some people are crammed into an apartment with multiple families, So there's different understandings of how you would define houselessness or homelessness. But all 3 of these types of services are essential to helping people start to see a little further down the road, which stretches out their poverty line. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, yeah, so when somebody's in a survival mode to the point where they don't even know where they're going to sleep that night, yeah, that's their level of poverty.
And so, you know, there's so much to talk about around this, but what is your experience? You know, you've spent a lot of time in homeless shelters, and like, this has been your mission since you started your company. Yeah. So what have you learned, and what can you share with us about that?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking that, because I truly am just a normal guy that had no desire to be an expert or scholar in understanding this particular issue. You know, I've just had a front row seat for the last 10 years of getting to learn firsthand from some of the most innovative solutionists in the game that are actually doing something about the issue.
Yes.
I'm not an expert, but I am honored to get to learn from the people that truly are the experts. The biggest takeaway that changed my life was how approaching issues on a local level is the most effective strategy. We got to see the contrast of this during COVID. When you have something massive that happens, that affects a lot of people, we're very quick to support the Red Crosses, the World Visions, the global national organizations. It takes a lot of time for those resources to get to where they need to be.
Yes.
And it's not the most effective way of maybe going about contributing, you know? On a local level, when you support your local organizations, the people that are doing really good work locally, things get done very quickly and more efficiently, because these are people that understand homelessness in their geographic location that might look completely different than homelessness on the other side of the states. Different demographic, different geographic situation, different cause to homelessness, you know? Different weather condition. Like, there's so many different factors when you're dealing with complex issues like homelessness. It looks different in every geographic location. And so the way in which you approach an issue locally matters, and in my opinion is the most effective approach to solving any issue. It's not going to be done on a top-down strategy. And that's why we've seen government try to, you know, fix a lot of major issues, and they promise us that they're going to fix these major issues, and they continue to get worse. Mobilizing people locally and giving locally is the most effective way that we can solve issues that we're dealing with in our society. And I am going to dedicate the rest of my life and my career to that message.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think about the fact that you're no longer drinking, and your mom was an alcoholic and your dad was, like you said. And you're changing generational patterns right there, right? Like Dr. Terry Real talks about like how important it is for us to, like, how hard it is and the courage it takes to break generational patterns. Yeah. That one right there, like, that's a full stop, right? So that is so important for the people. Like, if you're talking about like your home, like, spread that out to your friend group, your family group. Yeah. The change starts within, right?
Yeah, and that was one of, these last few years have been extremely hard. But my goal going into this year was that I wanted to have my sole primary focus be on being good with the person in the mirror.
Yes.
I'm convinced that if you can do that, it's going to unlock so many amazing opportunities for you. That you can't even imagine, you know? Yeah. So I'm trusting that right now. Like, it's been a long journey of getting back to a place where I can look at myself in the mirror and be good with that person.
Like, you know, the way I see it, I think of it as like, you're in full integrity, right? That since I stopped drinking, it's like I can fully say, oh my gosh, like, I can be proud of the woman I'm looking at. Because if I was drinking too much and like doing stuff or saying stuff that wasn't like, that wasn't me being in my full integrity. Yeah. Now I messed up all the time. I'm like, we all do. We all make mistakes. It's not about being perfect, but it's about being able to look myself in the mirror and be like, you're doing your best.
It's a great point. It's not about being perfect. It's about being honest.
It's about being honest. Yeah. I love that.
And that's a hard place to get to, you know, especially when you have, you know, layers and layers and years of things that you've convinced other people and you even convince yourself of that isn't true, you know? And then you finally get back to a place in your life where you're like, I'm free. You know, I'm free to be myself, and I'm free to own up to issues in my life or things that I've been hiding or whatever, and get to a place where you can be honest with yourself again. And that level of freedom is irreplaceable, you know? Because what good can you really do without being at a place where you're honest and you're good with yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's been my main focus.
Because otherwise you're just talking the talk. You're not walking the walk.
Exactly. You can fool so many people on outward stuff and not be good with yourself, you know? And I think that we're just in a time where things feel like they're really scary, and there's a lot of problems in the world, and there's a lot of things to be, freaked out by. But I'm of the assumption right now that there's so many things that are out of our control, but the one thing that you do have control of is being good with yourself and getting back to a place where you respect yourself. And that is where the real work is done.
Yeah. So I have a chapter in my book called Home is a Sacred Place. And the reason I wrote that chapter is because I realized when I was in my previous marriage that my home wasn't sacred. I was in a relationship with a man who was not who he appeared to be. Mm-hmm. And turned out to be hurting me and my daughters and our son. And I was like, no. Like, it's like my own home wasn't a safe sanctuary. It wasn't filled with, love and nurturance. Of course, there's a lot of love that I was like, but on the other side, there was a lot of, secrecy and deception and manipulation, which is not a safe place to be, not a safe place to live. And I realized once he moved out and I got a divorce and did everything I could to clear myself of that, it's like the feeling in my home completely shifted, Like my daughter started having their friends over again, and the air was lighter. Yeah. Of course it is. And it's like the tension is gone. Yeah. And there's clarity now, and there is love and a safe place. Yeah. And so, you talk about this with your, in your work around how important, home is, yes, it's the structure we live in, but it's way more than that.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, congrats on getting on the other side of all of that. I know that it takes a lot of courage when you're going through a very messy, complex thing. And you kind of wonder while you're going through it, will I ever have a sense of relief? And then when you get to the other side, it's funny that you're grateful for the small things again.
Of course.
Oh my God, I get to have a meal, just really simple things when you make it through a really hard season. And I think that that's one of the kind of beautiful parts about life. The topic of home is so interesting. It's obviously the debate on what is home just in general. I've asked a lot of people that question and I get a different answer every single time. So I'm curious to know, what is home for you? What is home?
When I think about home, it's my people. Yeah. Nothing more important to me than my closest people, my family, my best friends.
With them, and that is home.
Yeah. I also have such a, I think it's my relationships. If I know where, I am fully connected to God. I have such a close relationship with God, and God's always with me. I'm part of God, but my family, it's they're my peeps, That's what I think of as my home.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. What about you?
I've been on a journey figuring that out, Yeah, I think the same thing. I think people that are going to rock with you no matter what, the people that you can call and when you're at rock bottom and that they're going to be there for you, that's the people that show you grace in the midst of your own fuck ups, that is about as home as you can get, of having people around you that are going to support you during those very difficult times. I think also, even if I had lost all of those people, I think, my relationship with God and my relationship with being good with myself.
Yeah.
I've been on that deep spiritual journey of being content with where I'm at all times, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a hard place to get to.
This episode is sponsored by our partners at BetterHelp. You know, over the years, I've spent so much time with therapists and researchers and relationship experts. And what I've learned is that the people who do the inner work genuinely love differently. And you know what that means? That means that we can learn how to love better. There are skills. BetterHelp is a company that makes this possible. They have qualified therapists online, over 30,000 of them, matching to your needs. More than 6 million people have taken that step, and you can switch anytime at no extra cost. When life feels overwhelming, therapy can often help. Sign up and you'll receive 10% off at betterhelp.com/loveready. That's betterhelp.com/loveready.
In all of your time spent traveling around the US and visiting all these homeless shelters, how have you seen that having a roof over your head change how you love?
Yeah, I mean, probably the most vulnerable thing I could share in this interview is that I went through a really hard last couple of years, and I got to a point where I was content with the life that I've lived. Like, I've lived a full life. I've lived a beautiful, amazing life. I've traveled all over. I've eaten good food. I've had amazing people in my life. I've gotten to do incredible things. And if I went tomorrow, I'd be very content with the life that I've lived. I've lived a beautiful life. That said, every day that I wake up now, I'm like, I'm on bonus time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm grateful for the smallest things in my life right now. And I feel like I've truly entered into like the second half of life, which is what Richard Rohr calls it, where he basically says, you could be 80 years old and not enter into the second half of your life. The first half of your life is spending like crafting a jar. And the second half of your life is filling that jar with like true substance. And I feel like I've entered the second half of my life in the sense that I have fresh eyes and I'm entering it with gratitude. So having a home and having or being connected in a sense of home and having a place to live and then going and connecting with people in shelters I'm functioning out of a place of pure gratitude right now, you know?
Yeah.
So that's not lost on me. The smallest things in my life right now that I get to have and appreciate, it changes my ability to connect with other people.
Yes. So you've got your company, Sackcloth and Ashes, your blanket company. That's amazing. You've got like 500,000 or more blankets that you've...
It's been a crazy journey. It's been around 11 years now.
Wow.
It's a miracle that that's even still around.
And you started your app. So I downloaded it yesterday, LOCL.
Yeah, thank you.
LOCL. I was like, so what's this all about? Because here I am in LA. I'm from Canada. So I'm like, what's going on around me and how does this work? We're more disconnected than ever, right? In this, well, we have such an online presence, but are we really connecting with the people around us and the community we're in?
Yeah, the season that I went through where I was like, I'm going to make it the mission for the rest of my life to dedicate to bringing forth this conversation of local. When I looked at what is the most effective way for me to help do that, I have always been a student of communication ever since a young age, and then built my brand in the era of social media. I grew up in the era of social networking. You know, 2004 I was a senior in high school when Facebook like really came onto the scene.
Yeah.
And then social networking evolved into social media around 2014, where it was social networking was like, how can we help you stay more connected to the people in your life? That evolved into social media, which is no longer about connection, it's about content. So this last decade has been about content. And I got to build my brand in the era of content. Content creators were the influencers. And I could always predict like 2 years out, like what was the next thing that was gonna happen. And about 2 years ago, I was like, we're going to see a monumental shift again in online communication. We're going to see the next evolution of online communication go from social media and evolve into community networking. And content creators will no longer be the influencers in this next decade. Community builders will be the new influencers in this next 10 years. So my thought was, who's the one that's creating the platform for the next wave of influencers? Instagram did an exceptional job where they were like, we're not just going to create an app for photos and videos. We're going to be the platform, the resources, the conferences for this next wave of influencers, which is content creators. And that's why they blew up on the level that they did. I'm looking at the next wave of influencers being like, it's going to be community builders. They're the ones that are going to house all the power of influence in geographic locations. We don't have a platform for them. We have Nextdoor, which
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, which is a neighborhood app, essentially,
Okay.
where people can connect on a geographic zip code level. And there's just a lot of complaining on it here in the States. And then you have Meetup, which hasn't innovated in the last 5 years.
Yep.
You have
Meetup's been around for a long time.
It's been around for a long time, and they've been bought twice. Then you have dating apps, and then you have messaging apps like GroupMe, WhatsApp, and that's it.
Yeah.
For the whole local digital landscape, that's all we have. And so I was like, I didn't want to get involved in tech, to be honest with you, or try to start the next major social platform. But I was like, somebody has to do this. And I waited for like a year. I even had written Elon a letter after he bought X. And I'm like, here's the things that you can pivot on the platform to like create a more proximity-based connection. And never heard back from him, obviously. But I was like, somebody's got to at least create one platform that is existing, that's making decisions on behalf of the people, that is a communication platform that exists 5 years from now, that isn't owned and operated by an AI company.
Yes.
All these communication platforms are owned and operated by AI companies. Google's owns YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp are owned by Meta. X is owned by XAI. LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. Like, these are the platforms that we're communicating on every single day. We need at least one platform in the future that is still promoting human connection and real analog communication that isn't completely being taken over and driven by AI companies or the people that have the wrong intention for society, you know? And so that's why I got involved in tech. I feel like I actually enlisted in tech because I do think that the decisions that we make in the next 2 years are going to set the trajectory for generations to come. And so LOCL was this app that I created about a year ago. I designed it out where you can create or join any digital community within a 50-mile radius. And so you could start a community or a group, title it, and it's not something that you just invite people into. It's discoverable to everyone within a 50-mile radius so people can find and join your community.
Wow.
And then,
can you give us some examples of what that means? What that looks like?
Yeah, there's 2 types of communities that have started so far on the platform. As like we've got our first wave of like a couple thousand people on it, so we can kind of see like how the ecosystem, how people are using it. You know, there's 2 types of communities. One is there's a real community out in the world that starts a community on LOCL and they invite people in. You know, like a run club.
Okay.
And instead of using WhatsApp or a Facebook group, they're using LOCL to house all their communication in their community. And their run club is discoverable to anyone else that would want to join it. Then the other type of community is somebody that starts a community around a particular interest. And they're like, I don't know anybody else that's interested in what I'm interested into, but it's findable. So one guy started a chess community out in Fargo, North Dakota, and then boom, 20 people joined it. And now they play chess together every week.
Great.
So the intention for LOCL is to organize online and gather offline.
Yes. You're gathering, you want to gather in person.
Yes, that is the goal. Communication to streamline this like network of micro communities and be able to find and scroll through all the different communities that are popping up around you that you can join and stay connected in. It's going to be a really powerful thing in the future. And we're launching a desktop browser version this month. And then here in the next 2 months, we're launching events on the platform. And that's where we'll compete with Meetup and Luma and Eventbrite. So you can easily find all the events that are happening around you, but not only that, but stay connected to all these different people groups through these communities. And the people,
That's really good news.
yeah.
I have to say, like, Bob, I'm listening to you talk, I'm going, this is really good. This is moving in the right direction.
That is, it is a positive pendulum swing back to some aspect of community and local connection. Because we've reached the top of globalism. Like, we've globalized everything, right? In the last 200 years. Only 200 years ago, people didn't travel or communicate outside of a 20-mile radius.
Right.
So all of human history operated and lived and
it's like we're getting back to our village mentality.
Yeah,
right?
It's in our DNA.
Yes.
Like, we are meant to live in community, right?
Yeah.
So when we have globalized everything, finance, communication, news, why is most of society right now have high anxiety and depression? It's because we were never meant to live in a globalized society, right? We are meant to live in localized community and have human connection. So that's why we're seeing this rise of run clubs are shooting up 200%, pickleball clubs, mom groups, Bible studies, like things that are now starting to become real community are starting to surface again, and people are hungry for it. And it's, so what I'm betting on is, while everyone is betting on AI and the future of innovation, in that regard, human need for human connection and community will never go away.
You're right.
And and we have to create the future that we want to see. It's not just going to happen, right? And the struggle with where things are going with AI is that there's a difference between innovation and adoption. We can innovate in a really fast pace, right? But if the public doesn't adopt it, then it can only go so far. And so I do have a lot of faith in people's decision making, in that we know intuitively what is right and what is wrong. And the thing that we're going to be up against is, it's not a matter of if people know what is right and what is wrong. It's a matter of how addicted are we to the thing that is wrong. And the only antidote to addiction is community.
Yes.
And so that's where.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So even though we're like,
it's connection.
Yeah, even though we're addicted to our phones and addicted to social media and addicted to now all this weird AI stuff, we can tell ourselves, we know that this is wrong for us. But the only thing that can truly free us is a real sense of community. And that is what I'm betting on. And so, that's what I'll spend the next decade building, and try to do it right.
Wow.
You know?
Well, I'm here for it. I'm here to support you in any way I can, Bob. I think that's incredible.
Thank you.
You're doing awesome work. Thanks. And you have been, like, since you started Sackcloth and now LOCL. I mean, that's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm on this crazy journey, and our company isn't to be, how can we be the hero and do more?
No.
How can we use our platform to help educate and empower people to take action on a local level?
Yeah.
And that's the hope, is having a product company that inspires, and having a tech company that actually is an infrastructure that's going to allow people to do that more, is the goal.
Yeah.
Figure out what you can do locally and get involved, you know, is the only message.
Yeah. Well, I just think that talking with you, it fills me with so much hope, and fills me just like, that's so good. It's very empowering, right? Because we are going in the right direction. You know, you look at the news and everything else that's going on in the world, so much going on in the world, and it's divisive, and it's like power hungry and all the things. And it's like, no, not in our, like, that's not on my watch. That's not happening I'm going to make sure it's not happening in my home.
Yes.
It's not happening, you know, with my friends and our family. And it's like, how can we make the difference within our lives?
Yes, 100%. And that is the mindset. Like, people ask me, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future? And I always say neither.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to sit around and see how things play out.
Right.
I'm an entrepreneur. I believe we get to create.
You're part of it. You're part of
we get to
solution.
create the future in which we want to see.
Yes, we do.
And if you can get millions of people to believe that, then we're going to have amazing more opportunity. You create a beautiful world moving forward. And I still have hope that that's possible. We get to create the future that we want to see.
We absolutely
and
do.
the people are more powerful than we think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about, I've got 2 teenage daughters. My son is 4.5. What can we offer to our kids to be like how important community really is on like a tangible level?
Yeah, I'm not, first and foremost, I'm not a parent.
No.
Yeah, I want to be a parent at some point, but when I've gotten to like learn vicariously through my friends, who have young kids and things, like I just talked to one of my close friends today, and he was telling me about a situation with his son, and they had this blow up, and his son's 10, and he's like, I'm gonna run away, and that dynamic of, he's like, oh my God, am I failing as a parent? And working through all that, whether it's the parenting scenario or just people in your immediate circle, is first and foremost, do what's in your control. And secondly, is there's no better thing that you can do than spend intentional time.
Yeah.
Because I said, well, what do you think is the answer to this blow up that you just had with your son? And he said, I'm going to go on a trip with him this week. We're going to pack up the car and we're going to go on a trip, and I'm going to spend time with him. And it's those kind of moments where, yes, you could have a sit down with him at the house or whatever, but to go on a trip together, to create time together, to sort, like he was like, I hope we can have a deeper relationship. And I'm like, the level of grace that your son's going to offer you, if you're spending intentional time, which is what he ultimately wants, is going to be a beautiful thing. And I think that intentional time spent with somebody is one of the most powerful things that we can do, especially that we live in a world now where there's not a lot of it happening. We're spending a lot of time, but we're not having intentional time with people. And you can have it in small amount of intentional time that means more than spending a lot of time and it doesn't mean anything.
I want to ask you a question around home, because you've been working amongst homeless people. And so what would you say is a common myth around home in the collective?
I mean, the obvious answer is that home is like a building, that it's 4 walls. I think that most people have gotten to a place now where that's pretty obvious, it's not. And that's why there was this whole debate of like, well, it's not homelessness, houselessness,
Yes, or unhoused.
And and I'm like, it doesn't matter. What matters is understanding that 4 walls isn't necessarily the thing that represents home, It's, to your point, it's people, it's a feeling, it's, whatever it is to that person, to be honest. And most people, the most common answer I've gotten when I ask people, what is home to you? It's safety.
It's safety.
Yeah, they want to feel safe. And
safety is like, you think about safety as how important safety is. And safety in our relationships, safety in the spaces that we're in. Like, there really is, it's a human need, and it's so very important. And a lot of us don't, a lot of people don't have safety in their homes. Wow.
Exactly. So that's how I would answer, is like the most common misconception is that it's a building, but the answer from the majority of people is it's safety.
Wow. So the last question, and this is a question where I'm asking everybody, is your definition of love. What is love?
To give with no strings attached. To give with no strings attached. The most powerful displays of love is something that was given to me despite me deserving it. And that's life-changing, When you experience a sense of love, grace, mercy in a season where you don't deserve it, that is what really truly has an opportunity to change a person, And I've gotten to experience that. I'm grateful that I've experienced love and grace in my life, that in the seasons where I least deserve it, it was shown to me and created real change in me, made me want to be a better person.
I really love that. It's a miracle in itself, right?
It is, because it's literally like getting the opposite of what you deserve.
Yeah. Today, what I've really taken away from our discussion is really how, we have, I started out saying that we're alike in in the fact that it is about building relationships with ourselves and with each other. And you're all about being local and how important community is. It's about being present with the people around you, right? And we're not going to, phones are going to be here, technology's here, but I love what you said about how it's the community builders that are going to move the needle, right? It's coming together with the people around us.
Yeah.
And whatever that looks like, within our control. What can we do, to build our community, build our friend, be close to our friends, close to our family, close to our colleagues.
Yeah.
That's how we do it.
Yeah. And one thing I really want to do and promote in these next few years is that the greatest companies in the world open up the accessibility for anyone to do something or to be something. So like Nike, it's like everyone is an athlete, right?
Right.
Apple was like everyone is a designer. I want to build a brand that promotes that everyone is a community builder.
Yeah.
That even if it's the most niche, smallest little thing that you're interested in, you can build community around it.
Yes.
And and everyone has their inner nerd that they're
awesome.
they're geeking out on something.
Right.
But everyone has the ability to build community.
Wow. Well, thank you, Bob Dalton.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Everything today. It's been a pleasure, honestly.
Yeah, likewise.
Follow us at Real Love Ready and at Soul Print Media Co. on social media and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The Real Love Ready series is a Soul Print Media production, presented by BetterHelp, hosted by me, Robin Ducharme. Executive producers are Robin Ducharme, John Kim, Tara Malhotra Feinberg, Hilary Swanson. Produced by Miriam Debbie Talbot, Tara Malhotra Feinberg. Directed by Miriam Debbie Talbot. Edited by Susie Landers O'Connell. Director of Photography, Scott Simic.